behave.
I will call to order the Personnel Policy Curriculum Committee meeting, which was duly noticed on November 22nd, 2024, through posting and notification of the press in accordance with Wisconsin 19.84. Notice is hereby given that school board members who are not members of this committee may attend this meeting so as to constitute a quorum of the Board of Education. Any such board member attendance will be for information gathering only and will not result in direct decision-making by the Board of Education at the committee meeting. I guess we go to we adopt the agenda later. So I'm just getting back in the, what order I need to be in. So safety message. I pulled up a few things for December and I have this for you. Install or inspect smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. Check your chimney for blockages and soot. Never leave a burning candle unattended. Turn off tree lights, decorations, and space heaters when you leave the room or go to sleep. I think leaving the room is a little tricky because I'm not in the same room like for just periods of time. So, but when you maybe leave the home, I think, instead of leave the room would be good. And don't throw wrapping paper in the fire. That's one that I think people could get in trouble with, especially sometimes there's like metal components that like, foil or whatever. Only use lights that are tested for safety. And then here's one, keep an emergency kit in your car and at home. But your car, if you normally have those things, be sure that you've put them back in the car if you took them out over the summer. Your scraper, you might need that sometime soon. So anyway, there we go. Hopefully those helped you with the safety plans in your life. I need a motion to adopt the December 2nd, 2024 agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes unanimous. We are now moving to the middle and high school grading and retake policies and procedures. Chris Medenwald.
Do this. Good evening. So I'm going to go through some details about the middle school and high school grading. I did ask a couple of our middle school and high school principals to be here in case we get some questions that I can't answer on some things. So I'll go through and there'll be time for questions. So the first part I'm going to go through revolves around our 3 middle schools. And this year, we made a change to going to letter grades at the middle school level instead of number grades being 1 through 4. And I'll go through some of the rationale with that. One was a transitioning to high school to letter grades from that elementary grades to high school was part of our rationale. We also thought it may be more helpful as parents can see an infant on campus, and they've always been able to see. But the feedback we were getting from parents is they weren't really sure what it meant, right? What does a 3 mean? And I think one of the questions that parents would often ask is, well, is that good? Right? And because it wasn't something they were familiar with, right? Most of us didn't grow up in a 1 through 4 system. Missing assignments can be easily identified this way, and I'll show you exactly how the change we made with that. Performance on tests will be clear. Again, this just goes to an understanding problem. And then really we get to the 5 and 6, which is really the crux of why a simply understood system to increase communication. And I'll talk a little bit about what some of our anecdotal feedback has been on that. But again, it really was a system that we thought parents were familiar with from their schooling. And at least they had a belief they understood what that meant, right? A was good, F was bad in that. And then really taking all of those 5 reasons and hoping that would increase student engagement because there would be someone at home who would have a better understanding where their students were doing and could be engaged in the process. And also with parents understanding there'd be more communication with schools. So all of those. One of the things we don't have up there that we discussed is the vast majority of the new teachers we hire really weren't used to the 1 through 4 grading. They had never experienced it in their life. And so to ask them to grade in a way they never had at that level was sometimes a challenge. So that was really our rationale in looking at this. And we had done a little bit of piloting the year before at the 8th grade level and done some letter grades. Thought that was pretty successful, and so we did some things a little bit different. One of the things we wanted to be careful about in doing this is with the power of 0. And I'll show that when I show the scale in a little bit, but we wanted to make sure that we weren't saying, well, if a student doesn't do anything, they get a 0. They didn't do anything, right? If you don't do anything at home, you don't get something for that, right? And that's sometimes the rationale of like, you know, if I don't do something at work, I don't get 50% of my pay, right? And that's sometimes what people will say. The reality is that's not, right? Grades aren't compensation, they're communication. So we wanted to make sure that if a student received a failing grade, a 50% is failing, you're still failing, right, on a 10%. And if you didn't do something, we wanted to make that be something, and we assigned it 40%. And the reason we did that is we really wanted it to affect your grade of like, hey, this is a problem, right? It's not just failing, they haven't done it. And it's affecting the grade, right, even more so negatively, to be able to draw attention to that. And yes, you can still turn it in and you can get, you can improve your grade, but we really wanted that missing to be a signal, not only it's missing, but also of like, yep, and you see how the grade is affected negatively, and that's why. So that was the rationale behind that. So percentage-wise, we decided to keep it very simple, not going with pluses and minuses and all the other stuff, right? We were making a transition, and we were transitioning the letter grades, and we just went really simple. It's 10 percentage points. Partly because we weren't so sure that, particularly in our first go of this, and I don't know that we'll ever change it. We'll make a decision towards the end of the year. It sometimes gets really tough. Like, can you tell me really what the difference is between 92 and 93% with those two students? All right, what's that look like? Okay, 92 and 93 is an A. There you go, right? We don't have to split hairs of is it A minus, is it an A, and that sort of thing. And there, you can see the missing grade is missing work and no evidence, but it really affects a student's grade as being a 40 percentage points, which is certainly a negative effect, even more so when they haven't turned anything in. So there's, it's not intended to be a consequence as much as it's intended to signal everyone in that student's life of like something's not going well here with this grade. One of the things we had feedback, and this will come up in the high school presentation as well, is we felt like we needed to incentivize students to have better schools and better skills in school skills, I guess. I used to call it when I was a principal, like, we have some kids who just don't know how to do school. Right? They just don't know how to do this. So one was we wanted to really focus on practice, formative practice. We want you to do the work. If there's homework, we want you to do it. We know that students get better with practice, which just makes sense. You get better at anything with practice. So we wanted to make sure we were giving students an opportunity to practice and also an incentive to practice. Students at the 6th grade level already figure this out, and they certainly figure it out in high school. They start doing the math. Like, well, that's really not much of my grade. I'm just not going to do it. Well, that's fine if it doesn't affect your grade that much, but eventually you don't learn as much or you don't do as well when we get to the point of tests. We also wanted to make sure that we were sending a signal that due dates do matter, that you can't just turn something in January that we assigned in September and say that somehow that's okay, particularly of how the learning progression works, of turning something in that was due in September or October in January. It doesn't allow you to learn and build on things and do things in the order and the sequence that helps you learn. And the last thing is we still wanted to stay true to retakes. We wanted to make sure that students had an opportunity to retake, but we also wanted to make sure that if you need to do a retake, that there's some things that we would request that you do. Like if you didn't do very well, then there must be a reason for it. So then let's go back and see, have you completed your formatives? Does there need to be some reteaching? At the middle school level, this has been a little easier for us just due to changing our schedule in the last 2 years and having a flex time and having that availability to for students to either complete some formative work they hadn't done, get some reteaching in a particular area they hadn't, either they had missed or they didn't understand. So it was just an opportunity for us to focus on that. So the feedback so far, and we haven't done any formal surveys, so this is really just anecdotal, and to be quite honest, comes mostly from our October parent-teacher conferences. Our teachers are seeing that assignment completion in general has increased. Students didn't often say, you know, is a 1, 2, or 3 bad? But they do say, I don't like it that I'm getting a D. I'm not okay with that. What can I do about that? Well, you could start turning in your work, right? So we have seen assignment completion going up. We have seen parent communication go up, which is one of the things we suspected and is one of the things we talked to our teachers about at the middle school level is parents are you're gonna get some emails because parents are going to be in IC and see that their students maybe aren't doing very well and say, what's going on with my student? We have found that that's true. Parents are reaching out more than they have in the past in our previous grading system. Parents believe they understand A through F, right? That they at least feel like, okay, if my student, right, if I feel like my student is a, you know, a CB or A student, that's what they're doing. I feel like I understand that. I feel like I know where we're going. And one of the things that we didn't anticipate was the assignment completion part, going with the last one, is students asking how they can improve their grades. And that is not something that we had much experience with when we were grading 1 through 4. So overall, the feedback has been positive. I think our principal would tell you most of the feedback they've gotten has been unsolicited from both parents and teachers, saying that this has been a positive change for them in what we've done. The rollout really went with staff in August when we brought them in. We had in the spring had developed what we thought would be some version of a handbook and some version of a grading policy and how we'd go through this. We ran it by our leadership teams at our 3 middle schools, got feedback, used that feedback over the summer, and then in August rolled that out with staff. And then when we had our back to school nights and our goal setting conferences with students at the middle school, rolled this out with parents. So that was in general the rollout, and I think that's what I have. So I'm happy to do my best with questions, and if I can't answer a question, I know Mr. Krieger is chomping at the bit to say something. I know.
Thank you. So I'm glad to go back to letter grades. I'm glad to see that. I was never a fan of standards-based grading. But I've got some questions here. So first of all, this rollout, was this in the middle school?
Correct.
Okay. And the changes in the middle school, are they the same at the high school level? Are we?
Well, I'm going to go through the high school. They are not identical, no.
They are not identical?
No.
Okay. Okay. So was the problem for you talk about communication with parents, and I agree with that. You know, that's got to be improved. And is it the fact that kids were not? I mean, kids have always not turned in work.
Mm-hmm.
And is it Infinite Campus? Is it that parents are more tuned in to what's going on a daily basis when they see assignments come in? Like, oh, what's that? You know, is it that changed? I guess I don't, you know, what's going on?
Well, this is speculation.
Yes.
I believe what happened is, so a 3 in our previous system literally could have meant a high C to an A, right? Okay. Was the range and where that went. And so there was never, if you were a parent and you're like, my kid's not getting C's, my kid can do better than C's.
Yes.
Well, you didn't know that.
I see.
And now they do know that.
Now you do know that.
Now you
can see
do
that.
know that. And right, we can have a philosophical debate of what letter grades really mean and what they really understand. But in general, parents believe they understand the letter grade.
Okay.
Enough so that they will address things when they believe things aren't where they'd like them to be. And that was harder for them to really understand unless their student was getting 1s.
Sure. Okay. And so if a student doesn't turn in work, it goes in the grade book as an M. But that M is valued at 40% of the assignment?
Correct.
Okay. I have a little bit of concern about that.
Okay.
And I understand, the math behind, like, because that's a standards grade-based, standards approach, right? Is that the 0 is too much of a penalty. And I understand the math of it, like I said. I am a little concerned about that. Can a student turn in work late?
Yes.
How, like, what's the range that you mentioned that, if you did something in September, and I agree with you 100%, it's ridiculous to turn it into January and consider it a valid exercise.
Yeah, typically, for both the middle school and the high school, our desire, right, and there could be circumstances.
Sure.
Our desire would be summative to summative, right? When we give a summative, so if we give a unit summative, we would like that work to be completed in that unit, because the next unit, we're gonna move on to something else.
Right.
So we would like all of your work to be completed. So I can't say that it would be 2 weeks. It might be 2 weeks. It might be a 4-week unit. It might be a 2-week unit. It could be a 6-week unit. But
Okay.
we'd expect work to be turned in that unit.
Okay, and so after that unit or whatever the deadline that's set, the student can't turn it in. I'm a little worried about and maybe you've gotten some feedback about the public perception of offering or compensating, and I know you don't like that word, a student with a 40%. And I would agree with you 100% that a grade is about communication. It's not, it's not a commodity, but in the world we live in, that's not always the case. But I am concerned, we've got concerns about low test scores and everything else. And then we are basically saying if they didn't turn it in, they still get 40%. So I'm concerned about the way that plays out. And also, I'm always concerned as to the impact it might have on students.
Sure.
When they shrug and they go, well, at least I got 40%. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so our rationale behind that really was, we were concerned that zeros would say, well, there's no way I can pass now, right? I've got 2 zeros in the grade book. Nothing I can do will increase that and do that. So that was our rationale. I understand what you're saying of like, oh, they really didn't do anything. And so that's a 0. Our rationale was we didn't want students to feel like, well, I don't have a chance now, right? There's not a chance for me to improve my grade because it's so far gone. Because a couple zeros could all of a sudden make it look like you were getting a 30% in class and doing something. So that was the rationale. While I understand your comment of they really didn't do anything and we'd like to send a message. I don't know, Mr. Krieger would have to say whether or not we've had any feedback on that. In the past when we were standards-based grading, if a student didn't do anything, it would still make it look like they got a 1, right? So we believed it was an improvement in that direction.
I see. Okay.
Lisa has something that
Oh,
she
sure,
wants
of
to
course,
share
yeah.
about
I'll-
that.
I'll
I just
ta-
want to piggyback off of what you said, because my question was regarding the power of 0 slide. My question, to piggyback off of Kathy, was, I'm not a big fan of the 40% either for a missing work, but so my question to you was this based on a best practice? Is this what other school districts do?
Yeah.
What was the 40%? I understand the whole part about the 0 and then saying what's the point of my motivation of ever getting a passing grade? But what about a 20? What about a 30? What do other school districts do for best practices since?
Yeah, I wouldn't say, I'm not sure you'd find a best practice on missing. I think you'd find the practice all over from what you're saying, Kathy. You'd find some schools that do zeros for not turning in work. You'd find schools that would say, well, we do 0 for not turning in formative work, but not summative work. And then you'd find plenty of schools doing what we're doing. 40 is a somewhat common, right? Because it follows the 10%, right? And I won't say that's best practice. I think it's easy, is what it is. It just followed the 10% rule of, okay, here's the next one down.
Is it
Can
okay
I
if
jump in?
continue?
Yeah, you can,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Oh. So, one of the key pieces to this, when we started the discussion, is grades are meant to be instructive and not punitive. if we start entering percentages in below 40%, they immediately become punitive. Because 50% is like, you haven't gotten anything. 40% is you've got less than nothing. 30% is twice or 2 times as more than nothing. So it quickly turns into this punitive exercise when one of the goals instructively is to teach students the independence without penalizing them, to get them to, when the stakes are a little higher, at the high school. So we are not the only district to do 40%. I was talking with my sister-in-law, Monroe, is doing 40% as missing. I think that is a very common practice. The big decision was we want to be teaching the kids about it and not punishing them for doing nothing. It's kind of like this middle transition as they move into the high school.
Thank you. So I have some follow-up questions then. So, okay. And maybe this is by class, but are grades for certain kinds of work weighted heavier than, like is there, out of a total grade, is like formative work worth 50% and written work or tests or whatever, is that 50%? Or how does that, does it depend on the class?
It depends on the grade for the middle school. So students coming in, 6th graders, it's 50% of their grade is formative, 50% is summative. 7th grade goes to 40% formative, 60% summative, and then 8th grade is 30% formative and 70% summative. So we're trying to put more of that emphasis on the end of the unit or project or presentation work than as they kind of move through the grades. I don't know how many kids really are understanding that math yet, but that's the intent of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you ever find, or maybe it's too early to know, that as the formative work becomes less valuable, I hate that word too, but you know what I mean, that kids will just bypass it, just like, nah, because all I have to do is pass the test. And so that, do you feel like, I mean, because this, as a teacher, this is kind of the thing that I fought also, because my essays were worth like 60%, and, quizzes and homework and things like that were worth 40%. But you have to do the quizzes and the homework to do well on the essays, and the reading tests and stuff like that, or the higher, more difficult things. And so there was sometimes this feeling like, well, it's just in that 30% category in one of your cases, and therefore, you know what I mean? I just worry about, and I get it. I personally think, like essays should be worth more, or have more importance because they're more difficult for some. And but do you find this, or is it too early?
I think the simple answer is it's too early to tell, and then the longer answer might be me repeating back exactly what you just explained.
Okay.
I mean, we can very quickly get into some grading philosophy ideas. What
Right.
we really want to guard against is bad grading practices that unfairly punish the students. So we've got our handbook that we certainly are teaching teachers about. We rolled it out in August, but even tomorrow night at the faculty meeting, there's going to be, hey, here's another thing to remember as we are assessing students and recording or that progress to parents. So, I mean, there's still some of that is going on with it.
I have to say that if there are strict due dates about about the time in which a student can turn in late work, I am more tolerant of that 40% for missing work. You know, as opposed if the student could still turn it in up to maybe a week or two before the semester, which was the practice where I taught, which we all hated. And we also, of course, you know, and all the educators in here are laughing because they're like, well, what, you know, you just went through the motions by this time, right? You didn't really learn anything necessarily. Or maybe you did, but it's, you know, that was from September. Is there, but I, you know, I kind of get it because if there's a 40% bottom, in that case. Is this, you know, 40% thing, for missing work, is this going to go to the high school, or is a 40%, or is the missing work still a 0 in high school? Still a 0?
It is,
Okay, good.
and our goal.
Yep.
Yep. Well, and again, we're talking about a progression over time.
Sure.
You know, we have some kids that are post-secondary bound, and the 0 is a reality there. You know, the other thing I would say is that whole formative summative piece, that still exists for us too. The thing that we're always talking with teachers about more so is alignment within courses to make sure that teachers of similar courses are grading similarly too, so that they have similar number of formative experiences, similar number of summative experiences, and that they're doing enough in each category so it's representative of what the student knows. And, you know, I think one of the things we always talk about too is that formative piece, that's more for the teacher. You know, that's an indicator to you of do they have it or not? And those are the things that, quite a little bit of that may never even hit the grade book, because that's to help you decide what to do the next day. So think about that when you're putting it in the grade book. And also, you know, that whole grade piece does incentivize kids to do work and turn it in. And and we've seen a lot of change already, because you were using letter grades last year with 8th graders. We've seen a change with our 9th graders already, having the awareness of letter grades and then coming to the high school. Much different in their operations, much different in their paying attention to, I have to do my work, I have to turn this in, much different grade distribution after first quarter. So on my end, this is a huge benefit for us.
Okay, all right, thank you very much, I appreciate the time.
Going off of what you just said, and you seeing the benefit of doing that 8th grade to 9th grade progression, would there ever be any conversation about changing the 1, 2, 3, 4 in 5th grade? So you could see a better progression into 6th grade?
That's not something I've discussed with Dr.
That's not what I can answer.
I'm just saying, you just said you saw the benefit, because I know if you went back historically to 6, 7, 8 and them not really getting it, and then they're wasting all of 9th grade, would it be beneficial to start them in 5th grade then for that grading scale, so that they're launching into a great 6th grade experience? I'm not saying 1, 2, 3, 4, but just a thought.
Yeah, it's not a discussion we've had at this time. We really wanted to make a change at the middle school level, and
I just wanted to share, so I have a middle school student, and that child is in 7th grade, and so I get to see, you know, what the numbered system was like last year and letter grades. So like, it's always fun for me in this position, because so many of the things we do, I live real time also as a parent. And I have noticed the engagement in that, personal engagement in my son's academic awareness has changed drastically. Not that he didn't care last year, it just was not super meaningful. And I would look on Infinite Campus and I would like, what does this mean? And I have been through this system now for like 13 years with that. So I definitely see it. And one thing that I want to point out is we noticed, and I don't know if this is ruled out of the other middle schools, because I just saw this on social media, that Marshall posted honor roll, and that, that hadn't happened because there just wasn't that. And so that was great to see, and then, my kid knew about it, and I know that there were kids when they started at the high school who didn't get the academic excellence recognition in the beginning because they just didn't get it yet. And then they felt bad or were embarrassed because they missed the first semester. And so I think I can see how even like that component of showing that academic excellence recognition at the middle level will help kids start out on that right foot immediately in high school because they've already been exposed to it at middle school. I have spoken with some middle school teachers as well, and I just said like, hey, how's it going? Without any agenda on my own, just, oh, it's so great because there's so much more accountability with our students already. At least that's what I had heard. So I am grateful for it, and I think just always making sure that the communication with parents and kids is, always like in alignment, because, sometimes like my kid, this isn't middle school, but like my kid might get something, I don't know about it yet. So I always think it's always good to make sure we're always sharing that stuff out with the parents, because sometimes the kids don't pay attention to those details. But anyway, I've seen a big improvement, and I talked with another student that they carpool with us, and that child also said, oh yeah, it's a big difference, and they think it's a good idea that we switch to this. So apparently those kids are saying yes. So.
All right, thank you. Yeah, our anecdotal evidence has been positive. The high school level, a few things just to, there's a question of are they identical, and they are definitely not identical, and I'll get into some of the rationale behind some of the things that are there. One of the things we started this, I believe, 2 years ago in re-examining some of our grading practices and some of the things we were doing, and it really got down to re-emphasizing habits. You alluded to, well, do they start doing the math? And at the high school level, they start doing the math of like, well, wait a second, that's only 20% of my grade. Why would I do that? Like, that's not that big a deal. Well, the big deal of it is when you don't do 6 of them, you don't really know how to do the summative, right? You haven't practiced. And so you're not very good at it. And so one of the things that, right, I have on there is students were playing the odds. And what would happen is, and I'd like to think this was, it happened once or twice, but I think our teachers at the high school level would say this happened more frequently than they'd care to have happen at all, is students really wouldn't do much of the practice. They wouldn't do much of the formative work. They'd come in, they'd get a good look at a summative, at a test, wouldn't do very well, and say, I'd like to do the retake. I haven't really done anything in your class yet, and now I'm upset about my grade. And so now I've seen your test, so now so that was one of the things a couple of years ago that we had gotten some feedback from teachers. Is there things we can do about this? So we started looking at some guidelines we could help them with to get students to practice a little more. And so one of the things this year that we did in our emphasis on professional learning community and professional learning teams is we asked our departments to come up with common grading practices. So in science, we want you to all be the same. In math, we want you to all be the same. In English, all the same. Because likely there was some differences that were happening there anyways that we may not have been aware of. It looks a little bit different in a welding class in what your practice looks like and your final projects look like than it looks like in a traditional math class of, hey, we're gonna do this, you're gonna practice, do this, practice, here's your test. And doing some things that way. So one of the things was the practice of formative completion and looking at what that percentage was for departments. So that happened a couple of years ago that we started making some changes and really building some templates for teachers. One of the things that we have found, and this happens, I don't know if this happens at the middle school level yet. We were concerned about this at the middle school level. having an electronic gradebook is helpful in that it does all the computations for you. But if you don't understand math, it can be a problem of when you say, well, this assignment's worth 100 points and this assignment's worth 50 points, and then I have a summative that's worth 30 points. Well, if you don't have your gradebook set up right, you just made that summative actually not worth what you thought it was. So helping teachers understand the percentages that go in behind the math for Infinite Campus is something we do at the high school level every August, actually. And it's something we'll have to do at the middle school level now moving forward. So again, the emphasis really was firm due dates. Was one of the feedback, and you know, Commissioner Myers was talking about. It was a frustration of, well, and then students turn stuff in way at the end just to get the points, and for not to be about learning. And one of the things with our emphasis on professional learning community is we want our teachers to take more responsibility for what students are learning, not what they're covering, right? Well, I taught this, yeah, but did they learn that? And one of their frustrations was, well, I don't know if they learned it because they're not turning anything into me. So what am I supposed to base that on? So we wanted some firm due dates. And again, the due dates revolved around, well, when's the summative expectation? When's the unit expectation of when that's done? One of the things they said that if students want to have a retake, they should have to have completed formative work. And the vast majority of our departments at the high school level say, well, if you've completed your formative work, you can definitely do this. If you haven't done that, then you need to complete this formative work. There needs to be some sort of reteaching. One of the things that we've emphasized from an administrative perspective is grades aren't necessary for learning, but feedback is. And so if you're not giving students feedback, they don't know what they have to do to improve. So we do have an expectation in general in that we're getting feedback to students within 24 to 48 hours in general. It might be a little bit different. You know, Commissioner Myers would say, well, if I have to grade 125-page essays, I'm not getting that feedback back in 24 hours, right? That's not going to happen. So, well, how can you get feedback in smaller chunks? And then the formative, summative, and Mr. Lau was alluding to this. Well, what does that look like? What's the breakdown look like? How are students prepared for that in what they're doing? Commissioner Hayworth had a question that she emailed of like, is it identical all through the school? It's not. It is. All the departments did come up with, this is what it looks like in our department for a retake policy. And that is consistent all the way through, so it would be consistent in science, whether you're in biology or chemistry. Mr. Lau was talking about we want to make sure we're grading the same. It's one of the focuses we've had with our professional learning community work is bringing student work in, and would you grade, what grade do you think this student would get on this essay or this short answer or something like that? Is not something we've really emphasized in the past. So that's been an emphasis with that. But those are changes that really began a couple years ago and changed maybe a little bit more to our professional learning community work this year at the high school level. So I don't think I put a question slide at the end, but I think that's all I had there. Yes. So I'll do my best with questions or comments, and if I can't figure that out, Mr. Lau will help me out.
Thank you. I guess I was probably one of the last to get on board with this whole retake even concept, because in the real world, or even in college, you don't have that option. You don't turn it in, you don't get anything. I don't turn in my work to my boss on time, I don't communicate, I don't get, there's repercussions. But the thing, Dr. DeGraff sold me on this when she said it's about mastering the content. Mm-hmm. And that is what I keep going back to with my kids who've gone through this. My concern is I want there to be, when I went to the middle school Ready, Set, Goal and they roll this out, and I said, even their retake and their missing is different than at high school, and if we're trying to be consistent, but then I remember back to, I've had 2 kids go through Craig now, there's not even consistency within the English department now. Not even calling them out, any department. And then you got TC and AP. I understand that those are graded differently in a different system, and you can't. But with each teacher, and my experience is only Craig, but they all have their own different, well, no, I'm not going to offer a retake on that, or I'm not going to, I just think this policy needs to be way more defined, and it's not right now. I mean, I don't want there to be a infinite amount of time that a kid can take a retake. I agree. 2 weeks is usually what Craig did. But I agree before the summative. But I also don't want a teacher to have to make a bunch of tests either. But I want, okay, the other thing I don't agree with is this 40% missing either. It should be 0. I don't understand, we don't want to be punitive to the student. They didn't do anything. That's the punishment. You get a 0. That's why we have the retake policy. So make them show. I made my kids when they would do a retake. Show what you've done to learn and master the content, that you even deserve to get a retake and to do something. So I don't understand, we don't want to be punitive to the kids. Well, real world, I mean, that's why we offer the retake, but also, I think to be consistent, because kids are different, parents are different. You've got parents who are engaged on IC all the time and on top of it, and then you've got kids who care a lot, so, or don't. Again, I really don't agree with the punitive, concept here, but, so I don't understand why it's not consistent. I think there should be, consistent retake, guidelines. You know, I think Craig calls it a ticket to retake, or at least they used to, like, that's not hard, like, and I just think it should be consistent across the school, and I understand besides TC and AP. In middle school, I think you're seeing a little bit of good reaction, and that's positive, because at least at our Ready Set goal, they stressed it being related to your eligibility for sports, and I know we want more kids doing activities, co-curriculars, and I think that's probably why you're seeing more engagement, that's a good outcome. I don't know. I still feel like and I even asked at Ready Set Goal, does this model a high school? Well, no. They said there's really no set high school policy. Why is there no high school policy? I don't understand this.
Yeah. And at that time, there probably wasn't, right, the high school teams hadn't gone through that process of the departments having to sit down and saying, okay, what are you gonna do? And if it's not consistent at the department level right now, that's something we need to address administratively, because it should be, because they're the ones who came up with it. The feedback that we had gotten from teachers is, well, you're telling us one size fits all, and it doesn't, one size doesn't fit all for CTE versus math versus English versus FACE. And so they wanted to have some input to say, well, this is what we all agree to, and we're all gonna agree to it. So if that's not happening now, that would be something we'd want to address, because we wanted to make sure that they had some input, and we gave them some parameters of where they couldn't say that kids can never turn in any late work ever, and those sorts of things, right? They had to stay within some fence posts.
And I guess I won't know until the fall when Brady's there, but I mean, we've got Liz is there now. I mean, it's just, hopefully it's tighter, because I remember Aubrey in English, yes, that was 4 years ago, but 4, 5, 6 years ago, but the teachers weren't even grading things within 2 weeks, so you didn't even know how you did.
Right.
And I'm sorry, yes, I'm picking on English, but that's what stood out to me, where I was so frustrated.
I can back that up, because when you talk about kids playing the game, I love you, Levi. Levi played the game. He did exactly everything you did here. And I was an engaged parent, so I'm like, but I see there that it's missing. I'm like, why is that still missing like that? He's like, well, that was 3 weeks ago. The grade's still not in there. So then you can't. And it was inconsistent about that ticket to retake. And then one teacher was doing something different, and this one wasn't doing it. And then I had to remember what teacher wasn't doing it, and this one was. And then, have you redid that ticket to retake? And did you do all that? I mean, and I was engaged. I can't even imagine what an unengaged parent wouldn't do. So at least it seems like it's a little bit, but I do have to say, I do agree with Michelle. Maybe I'm old school, just take the test. You get what you get. I don't necessarily believe in retakes. I didn't have that, maybe learning has changed. I just remember going to school, doing my schoolwork, and you take the test and you got what you got. So.
Well, I mean, I came around to it because I do want them to master the content. So I do agree, but you better show that teacher. you know what, yeah, my bad, I wasn't on top of it, I didn't study as hard as I should, but now I've done this to do, I do believe in the ticket to retake. Took me a long time to get, took me a long time, you do, she's convincing. It did take me a long time to get there, but gosh darn, I just think it just should be way more consistent. And it's not, that I've seen, and I hope this year's different, and I'll find out next year.
Well, I was just going to say that I used retakes, but I made the whole class do them on tests. And then I gave them a half point back for everyone, so they couldn't like just, and it wasn't that they had to tell me what the right answer was. Anybody, you're down to 3 now, right? So figure it out. You could probably figure it out. You had to write a little space, a narrative as to why that's the right answer. What clues, where did you find it? What did you see before or now that you didn't see before? And actually, a lot of kids really appreciated that opportunity. And so it fed their need for points. And it fed, I felt like, my need for making sure that or trying to make sure that they understood the content. So,
Okay, that reminds me of another thing. Some teachers at Craig do all the points back, some do some of the points back. No, I don't, just
I
get a
would agree with
policy.
you that consistency is really great. And it took us, in my department, probably 5 years to work out all of the details to make sure that everybody was satisfied. But because, you kind of get into you have I have my philosophy about why I did it the way I did it. And actually that was something that we did routinely as a department. So, anyway.
Okay, I guess I'll just follow up. I think we're hearing that this committee would like to see a formalization of something that's more, like, definitely cohesive policy on the retakes or missing late work. And I think that's reasonable. Doesn't always happen overnight, so I appreciate the work that's being done to, tighten up those things. I had a distressed senior at the start of the year because things were tighter, and that child has adapted just fine. So I think probably maybe not understanding exactly what those defined changes are caused some of the anxiety, and then I, as a parent, didn't know what they were either, and so again, like I said a little earlier, I think that does help. So that would be I think we could say we would really encourage to tighten up on those policies as best as you can. I also understand sometimes there needs to be a little flexibility because there are some circumstances that just sometimes life happens and we need a little bit of understanding. So you've really done a great job explaining all of these things, and I feel like I have a much better understanding on what's going on. But again, like, I'm an engaged parent and I didn't quite understand it. So I think that probably just goes to show that maybe we aren't doing the best job communicating across the district, and probably it's been a work in process, and that might be why. But so that would be great if we could formalize that. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything they want to say? All right, so are you ready to move on from this presentation?
Ladies, I'll stay up here all night if you want, but
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
you bet.
1.5 benefits update, Jamie Brown.
Thank you. So that's Bree. I can say that all over again if I need to. But I just wanted you to just see what the benefits department's all about. So, all right. So tonight I'm just going to be providing a very brief update on where the benefits department has been for the past couple of weeks. So we'll be talking about the benefits committee advisory meeting, the early retiree addendum, staff trainings, and then the RFP process. So we will start with the Benefits Advisory Committee meeting. We held our first meeting on October 30th. This committee consists of about 10 employees, Bree and myself, and then Commissioner Millard is also a part of this team. It has employees from all of the employee groups. And so our first meeting was right before Halloween. And you do have a copy of the PowerPoint that I did present to them just for information purposes. Two of the things that we talked about that I just wanted to focus on with you is we talked about how Dean and Mercy performed over the 23-24 year. So what that looked like. I went over the medical loss ratio with them, kind of explained that process. In addition to that, we talked about wellness. And so one thing that is, while I'm not an expert on, one thing I'm really trying to hone in on is the wellness for our people. That has kind of been a big initiative for us this year. And so I was talking to them about wellness. And so we're still coming up with ideas, but we don't want it to be just jumping through hoops. So that was one of the things that we expressed to them. Whatever we do for a wellness plan, we want it to be beneficial and do its intended purpose. So the next meeting we will have is on January 8th. And during that initial meeting with them, I did ask, what they want to learn out of it. And so a lot of it was, a majority of them said, well, how do you make that decision that's going to the board? So the next meeting on January 8th, we will be teaming up with the finance department, and they will be joining us, and we will be explaining the budget process and kind of how that final decision is made. Next update is on the early retiree addendum. So once that was approved by the full board, that information was sent to the retirees. And as of today, I've had approximately 40 meetings. We're down to about 130 people who are still eligible for that benefit. I've had about 40 meetings, like I said. I am, I'm still gonna hold them as needed. I am getting ready to send out a kind of a reminder, just as a reminder, here is your options. With that, certified staff do have to announce by February 1st, while non-certified staff, we ask for a 30-day notice. So hopefully in the March meeting, I'll be able to give you a better update of how many people will be retiring this year. Right now I have 8 to date, so that's where we're sitting with that. So the next thing we'll talk about is staff trainings. And I know I've kind of provided some information on this before, but September we talked about, we went over WRS training for those who are newly, maybe new to the WRS system in itself. In October, we talked about the HSAs, and we had our vendor Lively host that webinar. November, we had a really good turnout for our WRS training for those who are retiring soon. And so for December, we're gonna kind of take the month off. There's a lot of events going on in the buildings and things, and with the holidays. But for future trainings, January, we have stress management that we have teamed up with Mercy on. And so that will be in we haven't just quite decided if it'll be webinar or live. And then February, some of the feedback from the Benefit Advisory Committee was they wanted to get more information on how to manage prescriptions. So where can I go to get a deal, or where's the best pharmacy? How do I figure out that information? So in February, that will be our focus for our staff members. And then the request for proposal timeline. As you know, we are out for RFP for our brokers, for the health insurance consultants. So November 15th, proposals were due to the district. We did receive 4 of them. We have brought back consultants for interviews, which we started today. So we're going through that process. Hopefully, next week, the team will meet and we will either decide if we go for second round interviews or, how that will look. So as soon as we know and we finalize on a broker, we will be sharing that information out with you. And then just really quick, this picture, this is Amy Delvis. She is the materials handler at the ESC. And she is newer to the district, but she is very kind and very nice. And she is also hosting a Zumba/circle mobility class every Thursday. And we haven't had an exercise class at the ESC for quite some years. So when she offered to do this, we were pretty excited. And so she, on her own, ended up sending me that picture and said, "Here we are." So I just wanted to, show you Amy. So, is there any questions?
So super quick, the staff trainings, do you have to be on the plan to take these, or is it open to all
No,
employees?
no, we sent it out to all staff.
Okay, cool. The RFP, that's for like the role that Cottingham and Butler does for us, right?
That
Okay,
is correct.
perfect, that's all, thank you.
Question about so you've had 40 meetings about the retiring and the addendum and all that kind of thing, of the 140 of the potential 130 that are qualified. And of those 8 retirements, do they come from that 40 meetings?
Yes.
Okay, so these aren't people that we hadn't anticipated or anything like that, or, I guess that wouldn't make any sense, would it?
Well, they're still in that 130 group.
Yeah, okay,
Yes, and we knew we weren't gonna hit all of them. We knew some people were still gonna retire no matter what we would have
sure.
formulated. So,
And so the responses to the the addendum is
yeah.
keeping,
Yes.
of
it-
those 32 so far?
So nobody has, except for a couple, have said, "Yep, this is something I'm gonna utilize, this is what I want."
Okay.
Like, it's more of, this is your option right now if you're to retire. This is your option if you retire, if you work one more year and defer. This is what you will be provided. And then what I do is I work through the benefits of an HRA with them, because it is a new concept essentially. And so they're kind of learning a whole new insurance term. And so, I'm trying to educate them as best as I can, but I would say split 50-50. People are like, yeah, this is something that I would
Okay.
be interested in, or maybe sometimes it's, I don't have any other insurance to go on to, or I don't have
Right.
something else.
Okay, thank you.
So the 8 that you have right now, is that like a common number? Do you know? Is it a bigger number than what we would normally have at this time? It's
I
okay
had
if you
2
don't
this
know.
year, so far this year. So with having 6, it might be a few more than what I would normally have.
Okay.
I do not have any midterm retirements this year, though.
Okay. And then I am thinking about the wellness stuff you're doing, and I'm reflecting, if you haven't all looked through this presentation, I looked at the top 5 prescriptions and their trends, if you pay attention. For Dean, the top, it was several things for high blood sugar.
Yes.
There's 3 in the top 5 for high blood sugar, and at Mercy, 2 of the top 5 are high blood sugar. I'm wondering, in looking at these trends, what wellness supports can we offer from a district perspective on identifying, okay, these are obviously some health concerns our people are having. How can we support them in different ways that might help bring those costs down for prescriptions? And then, there's prescriptions have side effects and can impact health in other ways. So, which then sometimes can lead to other prescriptions that prescriptions are very expensive.
Yes.
So just, I'm curious what your, if that's, if we've looked at that for some of the wellness programming.
Yes, so there are a couple options out there for us to kind of, just kind of look at. So one example of that would, to be able to identify maybe a chronic condition, would be to run, why is the word slipping from my, health risk assessments. So where they would do like blood tests and things like that, and it's all private. And so that would help identify maybe somebody who didn't know they had high cholesterol or high blood pressure or things like that. So that is, an option. We did do that a few years ago. And so we had kind of mixed feedback. We did require spouses to also complete it. So it would be, yes, that is something that is on our radar, for sure.
Obviously, it's tricky. Health is tricky,
Yes.
and conditions are. I mean, it's all very tricky business. But I just like that. It was curious to me when you look at this and you see like, there are some trends we're seeing, and so it's just obviously something that I think we should be mindful of as a district. If there are things that we could be doing to help our people. It's obviously different if it's a retiree on the plan who isn't, currently employed. But if there are things that we could be doing to help our people live healthier lives, and could potentially reduce some of the prescriptions that they're on as well. So that's great. So anyway, I don't have anything else to say, but this was really nice to see. I think it's really good for us to see, what these, what you're doing in the meetings, and it helps us to understand. I really like the idea that, you told us the questions that they asked at that first meeting, because now, the decision-making, as we go through that process, we know that more people are understanding the steps that are involved in that really complicated process. So I think this is really helpful. I don't know if you have anything that you want to say, but thank you so much for putting this together.
Thank you.
We'll continue to have more updates like this, because I think it's really great. So, great, thanks everyone. So next week, Monday, is the planning session for this meeting into January. Of course, we've been planning out months in advance, but just so if there's anything that obviously you would like for us to be considering for a future agenda, please reach out to me before Monday, or anytime really, and then we will get that going. And then our next meeting is in January, like the first Monday in January, right? 6th, so it'll be bright and early in January. All right, any questions? All right, guys, this meeting's adjourned.